On behalf of the Professional Baseball Strength and Conditioning Coaches Society, I'd like to welcome you to the PBSCCS Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Messina.
All right, everybody. I'm here with Andy King of the San Francisco Giants organization. Andy, thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate your time. Tell the listeners about yourself, if you would, please.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. Like Chris said, Andy King, I'm with the San Francisco Giants. I'm in my 11th year. Super fortunate to be here. Very lucky, love what I do, work with a lot of great people. So yeah, really happy to be here.
And so current role is minor league coordinator, correct?
Correct. I'm our minor league strength conditioning coordinator. I've held that role. This is my 4th season now.
Okay. And then what was your journey to that role? Obviously, you said you've been in the org 11 years. Like, did you work through the minor leagues? Did you start a little higher and just kind of bump up? Like, what was the journey for you?
Yeah, I started from pretty much as low as it goes. So I was a Division III baseball player with my track to be physical therapy. Realized that strength conditioning was a real thing with my college strength coach, Chris Hartman. He was like, "Hey, do you want to come in and work for me for my private company, do some personal training, work with some high school kids out in Minnesota?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, let's do it." So from there, realized strength conditioning is a real job. Went to the University of Wisconsin River Falls, which was a Division III school without baseball. And I was there for a year and a half. And it was myself and our director of athletic performance, Carmen Pata. It was the two of us for 450 athletes for a year and a half. And so it was us grinding away from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., 5-6 days a week in the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin. And it was a lot of fun. And I was there for a year and a half and outgrew that pretty quickly. And Carmen, I really appreciate him because he was very forward with, "You've outgrown this, you need to do something else." So applied for a job with the Giants and got it. I was short season for 2 years in Salem Kaiser, high A San Jose for a year, double A Richmond, and then I was in Sacramento between 18-19 in the Sacramento bubble before joining as a coordinator.
The gig where you had 400 plus athletes, 450 plus athletes, like in the moment, you probably didn't think anything of it. You were just grinding it out, like coaching, like really having a blast. And then looking back on it now, you're probably like, that was absolutely crazy of like what we were doing. But I feel like you just learned so much from that, and doing that early in your career, at least for me, like really helped me like, you know what? Yes, this is what I want to do. Did that kind of feel the same way for you?
Absolutely. And it was so cool too, because Carmen, he's a former Minnesota strongest man and Olympic weightlifting champion. So he went over to Italy for the world championships for 3 weeks during fall football camp, volleyball camp. I think soccer was in there too. And he's like, "Hey, you have the keys to everything. You're on your own running the ship." And so it was me by myself, no communication with him at 23 years old for all these college kids. And he came back and the building didn't burn down at that point. And he was like, "All right, yeah, you did a good job. It's time to move on."
Yeah, when I was a GA, it was literally our head guy, and then the 3 GAs were like the assistants, and then we had a bunch of interns and volunteers, and it was like, just don't burn the place down, and that's like a huge win. And that's kind of like, it's cliche, but like that's kind of what I tell our interns and like our young coaches. Like, the main goal of the session was what? Like, if you're doing a dynamic warm up, it's to get them warmed up, right? Like, yes, there's specific exercise. Some could be better than others, but like, did you get them warmed up? Yes. Okay. Did you burn the building down today? No. Okay. Then like you won. Let's start there with that
Yes.
win and then build. And like, I don't, just looking back on that, like right now, I would probably not elect to do that in my older years, but at the beginning you shouldn't know any better. You're just like, oh, I'm supposed to be in the gym for 12 to 14 hours a day, and sometimes I forget to eat or sleep or talk to people, but I'm coaching all day. Like, yeah, this is great. This is kind of like what I want to do. And I don't know, for me, that really set me on the path of like, yes, this is a profession, this is real. Cause I was the same. Like I played D3 baseball. I didn't know strength and conditioning was a real thing. I liked to train, but I was like old school bodybuilding splits and everything. And then it wasn't until I got to grad school that I was like, oh, actually, like strength and conditioning and sport performance is like a real thing. Like you're not just doing bis and tris and chest and back. Like there's a rhythm, there's a rhyme, there's a reason to everything you do. Like this is like a whole new world for me, and I just couldn't get enough of it.
Oh yeah, I was as green as they come. I thought a high pull was a back exercise. I had no idea it was part of like a clean progression or a power exercise. So I was as green as they come. And being at that level with D3 athletes who aren't on athletic scholarships, they're there because they enjoy the sport and they enjoy being a part of a team. Trying to get them motivated and committed to their sport and train day in day out. It was I'm very happy that that's where I started.
Yeah, shout out to all the D3 grinders out there that are doing it. You know, there's a path to the big leagues if you want it. So did you know from the start that you wanted to be in baseball? Like obviously you said you were a player, like you got right into the Giants after you outgrew your first spot and you haven't left since. Like, has that always just kind of been in your mind of like, I played, like I might as well just pursue it? Like I'm sure it helps you with coaching and connecting with guys.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I went to Wisconsin because they didn't have baseball at the time. I didn't want to be labeled as a baseball guy, but it came back pretty quickly. I knew um I was going to be in baseball for as long as baseball wants me is what it seems like it's gonna be. I love being with the guys day in and day out. That's not my role as much anymore, traveling and being with the team, but being with the players, seeing all their ups and downs and winning and having success as a team, especially in baseball, it's so much fun.
I honestly, I couldn't agree more. I was like, as soon as I found out strength and conditioning was a thing, I'm like, all right, I want to be a baseball strength coach, but also let me make sure these other sports don't call to me. And so when I was in grad school, I worked with every team, and it was like, I have a lot of fun training these teams, but like, there's just something about baseball and training those guys that just clicks for me. And I was like, all right, I have to pursue this. So I totally feel you. I totally like can relate to your story, and I'm sure there's others that are listening that can as well.
And baseball is unique too, with the major leagues more so now than the minor leagues, because in the minor leagues we have every Monday off. But in the old PCL, I think of where we would get done with a night game at 10, 11 o'clock at night, have a 4 a.m. bus to the airport to fly somewhere else, uh, get in around noon after a layover, and then try and go out and play and put a 10 spot on someone and walk off the field as a winner. Like those are great memories and completely unique to baseball.
Okay, so let's run with that. So usually I kick this off with everybody's best professional baseball story. I want to know what yours is, whether it's something that makes you laugh, makes you smile, just a really fond memory that you have. And you've been in over a decade now, which is, you know, crazy to think about. Like, I'm sure from the beginning of your journey to now, you've seen a ton of things. So maybe picking out just one might be difficult. But if you had to, what is your best pro ball story that you have thus far?
Best pro ball story, I would say for me, it's whenever players or staff get calls up to the big leagues. Seeing Raj and Yaz and Webby and those guys get called in and told they're going to the major leagues for the first time in Sacramento. It's unbelievable to know that the work they put in from the time they were drafted to then, hey, they're calling their mom, their dad, their girlfriend, wife, whoever, to let them know that they're achieving their dream. Those stick out to me the most, but also staff too. Like I was roommates with Saul Martinez when he was told he was going to the big leagues. And then seeing Adam Bish go home to the Pirates, Hiro Sato, one of our trainers, getting the call to the big leagues. I mean, it's not just players that are in here going day in, day out trying to reach their goals. So those really stick out to me as the best memories of baseball, the most fond memories for sure.
Yeah, there's something really special about just being in a clubhouse when the guy gets the call. And usually, maybe I don't know if this is your experience, but when I was in AAA, I mean, we even had guys in AA that got the call, but the staff kind of got informed ahead of time. And just that anticipation of knowing, like, hey, after the game today, like we're going to have a team meeting and like they're calling this guy up to the big leagues. And you're just like, you're just watching that guy all day and like he has no idea, you know what I mean? He's going through his day, he's playing the game, he's grinding it out. He may go 0 for 4 that night, be miserable, and then he comes in the clubhouse and like he gets that call and it's just so special. And I think to the point about the staff, man, it's a conversation I've had with a lot of people and a lot of players is like there are a lot of parallels between the grind that the players are going through and the grind that the staff is going through, right? And there are only so many major league spots, in terms of strength and conditioning. If there's 30 teams, like most teams have 2, a couple have 3 people. So you're looking at maybe 65, 70 big league strength coach jobs, like in the world, you know what I mean?
In the world.
And it's like everybody wants that. And so to get that call as a staff member is equally exciting. And I think for you, you hit it right on the head there. Like your friends that you come up through the minor leagues with, or you see in other organizations, they're getting promoted. For me running this podcast, I've talked to so many coaches in baseball over the years that just to watch them and watch their progressions and see them like, hey, you're in AAA, man, you're knocking on the door. And then, next thing you know it, they're in the big leagues. And like, you give them just a little text like, hey, congrats, you're going to love it, blah, blah, blah. If you need anything, like, let me know, I can talk to you. But it's just equally rewarding for a staff member. And it may not be as celebrated, but it's that same grind, man. We're all in it together. We're going on the buses. We're on the planes. Like you said, those crazy PCL trips, like those are all so relevant to our journeys too. And I'm glad that you brought that up because that's something that just doesn't get talked about enough. And to me, it like just rings so true.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, guys are grinding, they're working their tails off to achieve a goal, and for us, it's about helping the players, right? When the players have success, everybody does. It's not about putting ourselves on an individual pedestal to try and reach whatever end goal it is, because when the players have success, we all have success. And so to see people rewarded for being good people and being good work, it's awesome to see.
Yeah, I think that's just honestly, man, one of the biggest things I've taken from this podcast over the years is there's so many good people in baseball. There really, really are. And they sacrifice time with their families. They sacrifice, honestly, their own health a lot of times to like put the players first and really just try to help them. Because the one thing that I understand is that like sometimes players just get such a small window in the big leagues. And so you have to help them maximize it to the best of their ability. A lot of times once a staff member gets there, the stuff that got you there will keep you there. So as a staff member, you may get 10 years in the big leagues where some players may get 10 days, you know what I mean? And if they get 10 days, you want to help them maximize those 10 days. And like I said, I think those good people, obviously you have to know the X's and O's, but just being a good person and being respectful of others, I think just goes so far. And there are so many good people in the game. So when they get promoted, like you just feel good for them.
Yeah, couldn't have said it any better.
What do you believe in within strength and conditioning that others think you are crazy for believing?
I don't know that there's anything that I do. I think sports is special and pro sports even more so. But what I've always appreciated is the process of getting better, whatever better means for that individual. It's not always cute, but consistency is key. And if I can define like my strength conditioning philosophy with one sentence, it's if you're in the gym, you're in the gym. Because that's probably better for you than go out and execute a plan consistently versus not doing anything, or versus waiting for a perfect plan.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think the consistency aspect, especially as you get up and you have those strange schedules, the strange travel, like the ones that are consistent usually make it through those gritty times. Like you're going to have times during the season where things really suck. And if you can fall back on just a consistent routine, like it's going to help you get through those. And I think with, all the social media and things like that, sometimes that gets lost as like, this is the best exercise for baseball players. These are the right exercises for baseball players. And a lot of times it's just doing like boring shit, like just sticking to consistent approaches that just work, and putting the time in when you're in the right place, right? Like when you're in the gym, it's time to put stuff in the process of the gym, and when you're in the cage, like it's time to put in work in the cage. When you're on the mound, like you work in the mound, like, but being able to have like those focused training sessions and be consistent with that focus and that intensity every day is really hard to do over 7 months and 162 games. But the ones that can do it, at least in my experience, are the ones that kind of last through those really gritty times.
Yeah, and when you talk about best exercise, or we talk about best exercise, what is the goal of it, right? What's the stressor? What's the stimulus? What are we trying to reach with that exercise? And if you have a plan and you're consistent with that plan, you may have stuff that you want to do, but then be on the road in the Cal League or up north where it's snowing and you may not be able to get on the ground to do what you need. Can you adapt and still have some sort of plan and be fluid with it so that you are getting your work in so that you're ready to go?
Yeah, and I think that was really an interesting thing that I saw, especially in the minor leagues, right? With sometimes the resources being a little more limited, is like guys would almost get hindered by their routines because, like, in the big picture, right? Like, let's say every day you do some sort of, glute work, hip work, T-spine work, and you have a set list of like exercises and a time that you do it, but then, time gets thrown off because of travel, or like you don't have a certain mobility stick. So like you have to do a different exercise. And like the guys that couldn't, like, if you had a big picture plan and you had some wiggle room within there, but you were consistent in there, those guys were okay. But the guys that were like, I have to do this specific exercise to do this specific thing, but I don't have this specific piece of equipment, those are the guys that really crumbled. And like we were getting to the point where some guys were like losing sleep at night just to make sure that they could have the correct like whatever at the field the next day. And I'm like, do you really need like that specifically, or do you just need, generally speaking, to be consistent with the way you move your body, the way that you approach your training sessions, whether it's 10 a.m. game or 7 p.m. game? Like, and it is a really fine line. But like you said, I think having a plan and being able to adapt is just so valuable, especially in the minor leagues where resources are just like, it's the wild, wild west out there sometimes, right?
Yeah, and we talk about agile periodization and being fluid where, whether it's exercise selection or equipment or a certain protocol for a day, being fluid and being able to make those adjustments to still get your work in, it goes a long way, especially in the minor leagues.
Yeah, and I think we'll address this more, further along in this episode, specifically with you being a coordinator and helping your coaches out. But before we get to that, I want to talk to you about the minor league camp that you guys were running in San Francisco. It was all over social media. I saw interviews of you. I saw your staff working with the players. And I was really hoping to have you on to talk about it. So I'm glad that we can. So just kind of give us a general overview of what that camp is, who's attending, how long is it, what time of year you're doing it. And then if you're cool, I would like to dive into that a bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah, definitely. Our media team and SFG Productions did a great job putting that out. I'm really proud of it because it got to show off how great our strength coaches are. A lot of the work we do is behind the scenes, as it should be. Let the players go under the bright lights and showcase their talent. But it was really cool to get everyone out there and have a really great week of training. So this has been my favorite week of the off season and maybe even the year since I've been in baseball. Some version of this camp has been going on in San Francisco since before my time when Jeff Head was here. And we've really tried to turn it into what it is today, which is a great week of training in the Major League Stadium where guys eventually want to be, and really help springboard into their off season whenever we have it in October, November.
Yeah, we would have a version of it, kind of like a rookie development with our guys, and they would come to Fenway. They would either train right at Fenway or we'd go to like BC in the bubble. They would have classes with media and mental skills and nutrition, and just kind of showing them a glimpse into the life of the big leagues. Is that kind of the goal of the camp? And then like, who are you bringing in? Is it like prospects? Is it just guys that are knocking on the door that might be there in the, the coming season or two, like guys that, maybe need to see that to kind of get them motivated? Like, what does that group look like? And then what are the goals of that camp?
So historically, that was our rookie camp up until 2020 when we didn't have the camp because of COVID. In 21, it was our 21 draft class and our 20 draft class. And then in 22, it was like, well, we have some minor league free agents. We have some guys we traded for. Let's bring them to this camp as well. And then with with how the minor leagues are shaping up now, it was like we have players in Papago, in Arizona, training throughout the entire offseason. Let's bring all of them to San Francisco now, and then let's make it more of a prospect camp than a rookie camp. And it's very similar to what you said with like the media stuff. There's strength conditioning, there's baseball, there's mental skills. We've had media training. We've had current major league players come in and talk with the guys. Major league staff come in and talk with the guys. You name it, we've probably had it at some point. So it's a great week to train, but it's also a great week to educate our players.
And then they get to see the city as well, right? You guys go out on like the Golden Gate for a run and everything. Obviously, they're in the ballpark. Like, I would imagine as a young player, that would probably get you motivated to be like, all right, I need to get back here.
Yeah, exactly. We've done the Golden Gate Bridge run. We've gone to Alcatraz. We've gone on the Embarcadero. We've gone throughout the city to give them an experience of being in the city of San Francisco, but also play catch, take ground balls, hit BP on the field, because it's a major league stadium. And no matter how many times you're there, it's one of the coolest things you're ever going to do.
Yeah, I can say with certainty that there was never a day that I went to Fenway, even in the off season, that I wasn't cognizant of like, this is Fenway Park, right? Like, I was going there 4 or 5 days a week in the off season. Obviously, I was there all the time during the season. And there was never once a time where I was just like, it's kind of worn off, It's like every time you drive in, you step on that field, it's just special, man. And it's really hard to put that into words if you've never experienced it. And I can understand from like a fan's perspective, if like they only ever get to go to one ball game or something in a ballpark. Like, I can understand why people go to the Giants Stadium. I can understand why people go to Wrigley or Fenway or Yankee Stadium, or, Pittsburgh's ballpark is beautiful. The San Diego, like even the quote unquote worst major league stadium, every time you're in it is like, man, this is a major league stadium. This is really special. And so I'm sure those kids really get a blast out of it, but also your staff too, right? Like, for them to see that, it's like we were talking about earlier, like the staff is grinding it out too. And that kind of gives them a glimpse into like, hey, someday this could be yours, or a version of this could be yours, right? Like, stay hungry and you can get here too, just like these players. Is that kind of the reason behind bringing the staff out there?
Yes and no. It is a strength conditioning led camp historically. And so we do want all of our strength coaches there to experience it as well. But with the players that we are bringing in, we want to give them as much one-on-one attention as we can. We don't want to be, herding cattle or anything like that. We want to have as best of a coach to player ratio, staff to player ratio as we can to do right by the player and their development.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That would be, the other side of that I was just kind of thinking of is like, depending on how many players are there any given year, like you could probably break them down into small groups. And then I watched the video that you guys had put together, and it seemed like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but each staff member kind of has their own little thing that they were like taking lead on, or like showing players, or like, for me, that was a cool thing in baseball. Our staff had, a guy who's really good at speed in relation to baseball players, and I could talk to him about base running. We had somebody who was big in PRI. We had somebody who was big in FRC. We had, all these groups all these individuals that made us a collectively good group with what they're bringing to the table. Is that kind of the same thing with your staff?
Yeah, we have such a great staff and such a a wide variety of expertises in our staff that when we build out our program, it truly is our program. So like Joe Palazzolo is great with a lot of the mobility and the prep routines that we do for the guys. Eric Wood and his speed development with our position players is top notch. Nick Fajardo and how he looks at the spine and how it rotates, and Chris Harm with his foot and ankle work that he does with the guys. I mean, there's more, right? But it's truly our program, and so combining it all together for the player, and then letting our coaches go out and demonstrate their expertise and how passionate they are, and putting it for the player in front of their face and for them to execute. It's a pretty cool thing to be a part of.
Yeah, that seems really exciting, man. Just from, if I was a minor league coach in that kind of environment and just being told by somebody that's above me, like, hey, you're really good at this. You're really good with the foot and ankle, like run with this because it's important. Dive as deep down to that rabbit hole and bring whatever you can to the table for our group. I would imagine that creates a really good environment of learning and kind of bouncing ideas for your staff.
I hope so. I sure hope so. I think we have a great.
At least that's the goal, right? Like that's
yeah,
kind
exactly.
of the goal.
Exactly.
So in terms of the camp, and then maybe just in general, within the culture of your minor league system, and specifically in regards to strength and conditioning, obviously, like what are kind of the key components that you're looking to develop, either within your own staff that they can then relay to the players, or specifically with the players and, their work ethics and things like that? Like what kind of components are you looking at culture-wise?
We want players to compete. We want them to compete against themselves, with each other, and against others as well, because ultimately we are competing against other teams in the minor leagues, but at the major league level as well, with the ultimate goal of winning a World Series together. So that's first and foremost, is learning how to compete. One of the challenges that we've given our players recently, and I took this from the Miami Heat, is if you don't want to be a world-class athlete, then what are you doing? And so the messaging behind that is not all of us are going to be the biggest, the strongest, the smoothest, best moving players, but we can be the world-class version of ourselves, the best version of ourselves. So let's put our best foot forward to try and make that happen, so that ultimately we're in the best position to have success when it comes time to get in the batter's box or on the mound.
Yeah, I really love that. And I think there are certain players that, as crazy as it is, just don't maximize the resources that they have available. But there are always one or two of those stories of like somebody got drafted in a late round, they came in, they bought in fully, they used everything around them to their advantage. They just went at it with full effort, intensity, commitment, and they end up making it. And like those are the stories for me that always kind of, we talked earlier about like guys getting the call. Like there are always one or two of those that are extra special, because how much extra work it took for that guy to get there. And I think with cultures like that, like people are going to weed themselves out naturally if they're not committed. But on the other side of that, like if you can push just one or two people to maximize a potential that they didn't even know they had, like that's such a rewarding feeling for a staff to know that, like, we had a guy who was here with us. He, when I was with the Red Sox, he was a position player, made it all the way to AA. They started him over as a pitcher. He went all the way back to the GCL, went all the way through the minor leagues as a pitcher up to AAA, became a minor league free agent. He ended up signing somewhere else. He got a call to the big leagues, and like we all called him because as a staff, like we had seen him basically grow up as a position player, fail, become a pitcher, grow up as a pitcher. He was, historically just always in the gym, always working hard, always asking questions, practicing his craft, watching video. And like for him to have made it like that, those stories are like those extra special ones. And I think if you can foster that culture, like there are people that are gonna, they're gonna scoff at it. And usually those are the people that weed themselves out in the game. Like you have 200 minor leaguers, like the odds of every minor leaguer fully committing and like going that extra mile is probably very slim. But on the other end, if you can get those guys that maybe don't believe in themselves to believe in themselves and then to push further than that, and they make it. Like, man, those are just really rewarding stories. And I'm sure, like, being in as long as you have, being in the same organization as long as you have, like now running the minor leagues, like I'm sure you have some stories like that that just come to mind, that you're just, ultimately the word is just proud. Like, you're just proud of the work that those guys put in, and you're proud of your staff for creating that culture around them to kind of foster that growth for them.
Exactly. And for those players too, it's not about being the best in the gym, but it's being the best baseball player that they can be. And that's why we're doing all this, right? Stronger athletes are better athletes, but it's not just strength and how much force you can produce, right? But physically, mentally, psychologically, spiritually, to have that confidence in yourself and your preparation that I'm moving very well today. I'm very fluid. I'm well conditioned. I'm confident in the work that I've put in so I can go out and perform. Yeah, there are tons of players that come to mind when we talk about those types of guys.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of wrap up on the camp here, if there's nothing else that you have to add, or if we might have missed anything, I think adding the video into the show notes for this and just like having the link there for people, I will definitely make sure that we do that. And just all I can say is just watch the video. Like, it really does give you an inside look into a minor league culture, into a group that's really pursuing a goal, and then also like a strength and conditioning staff that's being put in a position to succeed. And so kudos to you for that, man. Like I said, I watched the video and I was like, I have to have Andy on to talk about this. Like, we've been talking about having you on here for a long time, and it just seems like the stars align for like this to be the right one to talk about. So, props to you. I'm sure people have said, you're doing a great job, but if they haven't, like, at the very least, like, I see it and I see the work you're doing. And honestly, I'm excited for you guys, man.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And that camp was our staff and our players going out and doing a great job. My job during that week was to watch everyone be awesome. So I was happy to do that.
All right, everybody, that's going to conclude part one of this two-part interview with Andy. I hope you enjoyed this discussion and everything that we talked about in regards to the camp that they run for their minor leaguers out in San Francisco. 3 things that I took from Andy in this episode: consistency in your approach will help you through difficult times. Surrounding yourself with others who have different areas of expertise will help you to maximize your development and build a culture that encourages competition throughout. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll talk to you again on the next one.